The U.S. Department of Homeland Security says it has stopped processing all immigration requests from Afghan nationals indefinitely after 2 National Guard soldiers were shot and critically wounded in Washington. The suspected attacker was also shot and is in custody. President Trump says he's an Afghan national who arrived in the U.S. in 2021. U.S. media are reporting that he'd served in the Afghan army supporting U.S. special forces deployed there. Tens of thousands of Afghans who'd worked with the U.S. were offered special immigration protections after the American withdrawal that left them vulnerable to reprisals from the Taliban. Mr. Trump also confirmed that he'd ordered 500 more National Guard troops to Washington, in addition to the hundreds deployed earlier this year.
This heinous assault was an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. It was a crime against our entire nation. It was a crime against humanity. The hearts of all Americans tonight are with those 2 members of the West Virginia National Guard and their families. The love of our entire country is pouring out for them, and we are lifting them up in our prayers. As we are filled with anguish and grief for those who were shot, we're also filled with righteous anger and ferocious resolve. As President of the United States, I am determined to ensure that the animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price. I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth. He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about. Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it. His status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden, a disastrous president, the worst in the history of our country. This attack underscores the single greatest national security threat facing our nation. The last administration let in 20 million unknown and unvetted foreigners from all over the world, from places that you don't want to even know about. No country can tolerate such a risk to our very survival. An example is Minnesota, where hundreds of thousands of Somalians are ripping off our country and ripping apart that once great state. Billions of dollars are lost, and gangs of Somalians come from a country that doesn't even have a government, no laws, no water, no military, no nothing. As their representatives in our country preach to us about our Constitution and how our country is no good. We're not going to put up with these kind of assaults on law and order by people who shouldn't even be in our country. We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here or add benefit to our country. If they can't love our country, we don't want them. America will never bend and never yield in the face of terror. And at the same time, we will not be deterred from the mission these service members were so nobly fulfilling. That is why tonight I can announce that I have directed the Department of War to mobilize an additional 500 troops to help protect our capital city. We will make America totally safe again, and we will bring the perpetrator of this barbaric attack to swift and certain justice.
Donald Trump. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from North Carolina by Arise special correspondent James Blue. Thanks for joining us, James. First of all, what's the latest update on the condition of those 2 National Guardsmen, as well as the suspect who were shot? I understand they're all in a pretty bad way, and I wonder if any of their conditions are believed to be life-threatening.
Yeah, so the soldiers who were shot, part of the West Virginia National Guard, are still under very, very intense care in the hospital in Washington, D.C. They have been identified. The one soldier is 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom. She's a part of the West Virginia National Guard. The other soldier is Andrew Wolf. He's 24 years old, also part of the National Guard. We basically know that they are being monitored, they are being treated at a local hospital here in Washington, D.C. We have heard from their parents, both of whom are residents of West Virginia. And, basically the father of Sarah, basically said that he's holding her hand in the hospital. She does have a mortal wound. It is going to be a very, very long recovery. And he declined to speak of anything further. They're both in critical condition, but they are being treated, and it is likely that they will, with the great care they're getting, move forward. As for the suspect, he is also in hospital, also being treated for the injuries he sustained, several gunshot wounds that happened at the scene. And, it is sort of this sort of vigil around the hospitals for their care, while at the same time, a lot of things are moving sort of in other realms. As you may have reported, I think you did report, the President of the United States has canceled all visas for Afghan nationals who have not yet been issued and who are en route to come to the U.S. There is also an aggressive effort to try to vet and to identify all Afghan nationals who have come as part of this program when the Taliban took over, and many of the Afghans who cooperated with the U.S. fled to come to the United States.
And just in terms of that suspect, and just sort of trying to figure out more about him. I mean, we know, as you mentioned, he's from Afghanistan, but do we know much more than that? What perhaps could have motivated him to carry out this attack?
I don't think we know his motivations, but we do know a lot more about him. He served in what's called a zero unit. A zero unit were the sort of special Afghan forces that were tasked to accompany CIA troops on really hunting for the Taliban. They were trained in Kandahar, which is in the southern part of Afghanistan, and he was a real active member of that group and apparently went on many, many missions and was successful. He came to the United States and settled in Bellingham, Washington, which is in the western part of the U.S. He drove for over a day to get to Washington, D.C., and then in Washington sort of laid aim to the National Guard just a few blocks from the White House. He did this at the entrance to the Farragut West subway stop, and that really is just a mere 2 or 3 blocks from the White House. As you may know, Charles, the National Guard was deployed to a number of cities around the country, including Washington, D.C. And one of the big, big challenges and questions, like, what are they doing? How are they helping? And there was this sense that they were just sort of standing around doing much of nothing. And I think this incident is an indicator that the presence of the National Guard, although they were sent to protect and to make sure things are fine in Washington, they themselves are targets, which actually has made Washington potentially more dangerous and under more threat.
Indeed, because, we understand that President Trump has ordered the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to send 500 more National Guard troops to Washington, in addition to the hundreds, as you mentioned, already deployed there. But that's coming up against some pushback, with some security analysts saying that putting more forces in Washington could have unintended consequences, with different law enforcement agencies stepping on top of each other.
Yeah, Charles, one of the issues is that the National Guard is not trained for domestic policing, and that is the big consequence. The National Guard are military operatives. They know how to work in combat zones. They know how to assist during natural disasters. And so the big question is, what are they doing? a lot of the times people have taken pictures with them. They've gotten, burgers and lots of support from folks visiting. They have largely been in the sort of tourist zones within Washington. That's the sort of capital area around the White House and where all the monuments are. Now it's just been very difficult to know exactly what their role is. And I think there is confusion, and there will be increasing confusion as more of these National Guards troops pile in. And there's a real question, what is their role? And as you mentioned, what is their role compared to other law enforcement agencies? They do not have arrest powers. That's only with local jurisdictions and with federal law enforcement officials. So they really are in this very, very sort of middle space. And I think that is one of the big concerns. They are not necessarily the most effective. And as we've seen just with this incident yesterday, they are targets.
And James, as briefly as you can, because we're pretty much out of time, I presume that this attack is feeding into several debates in the US about immigration, given that this suspect came through a program to resettle people who worked with the US in Afghanistan and who were vulnerable to reprisals by the Taliban after the US withdrew from that country.
Yeah, this is certainly raising questions. I think you have a bit divided loyalty. As you know, a number of the U.S. military and the people who have served generally tend to be Republican and big supporters of President Trump. And although there are some Republicans who are questioning why are we letting these people in, there is a very big and wide and strong base of support from former military officers, military service members who served side by side these Afghans and Iraqis and in other places. They recognize the sacrifice that they made, and they most importantly know that if they remain in their country, they are targets and they could be killed. And so I think this is a debate that is going to happen. It's largely between the Republicans who want to close the doors and not let anyone in, but there are also Republicans, especially those who've served, who are very appreciative and believe is the least we can do is give them space in the United States so that they can have a chance of a safe life.
James, thank you very much indeed. James Blue is Arise special correspondent. He was talking to me on the line there from North Carolina.